My name is Melissa Ziobro, and I'm the Specialist Professor of Public History at Monmouth University in West Long Branch, New Jersey. Today is February 28th, 2022. We are here today with Dr. Tom Carey for an interview to augment the exhibit Monmouth County 9/11 and its Aftermath. This interview is being recorded with the permission of all participants. Tom, can you just confirm for me that you do indeed consent to the recording and that you understand this interview will live in the public domain?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Tell us just briefly about your early life, like where and when were you born and raised?
Okay, I lived out in Long Island, New York. Born in West Islip, Good Samaritan Hospital. Spent most of my life out there until I joined the New York City Police Department.
Okay. What year did you join the NYPD?
I joined the New York City Police Department January 1985.
January of 85.
The 21st to be exact.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Sure, I held a EDD doctorate. I have a master's degree in criminal justice and security management, and I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice.
Okay. Did you go to school before joining the police department?
Yes, so I did almost about 2.5 years of college, and I joined the New York City Police Department. I got on 20 years old, and I used some of the college credits from the police academy and went back to school and finished my bachelor's degree at LIU in Long Island, got my bachelor's degree there.
Okay. Do you feel like the department is supportive of educational efforts for
absolutely.
officers?
Yeah, they even helped me with my tuition, and as well as I was in the National Guard, and that's the reason I joined the National Guard is they helped me with my tuition as well, because I was part of the National Guard when I was 18, my first year of college.
Okay, I was going to ask that. So you joined the Guard at 18. Okay. So walk me through a thumbnail snapshot of your career with the NYPD between 85 and 9/11, which is our focus today. What units were you in? What positions did you hold?
Okay, so I started off working for the Housing Authority Police. It merged with the NYPD in 1995. I did patrol in Brooklyn North, Queens. I put in to be a police academy instructor, was accepted in the early 90s. Then the merge came in 1995, and I stayed at the police academy for a few more years. And then I worked in the legal bureau. Then in 2000, I got promoted to the rank of sergeant. And so I did patrol in the 6-2 precinct in Brooklyn South. And at the time, just before 9/11, I put in for narcotics division, which works for falls under organized crime. And then I got assigned to them. I went to training, and I just had finished training with the narcotics division to be a detective sergeant. And then, that's how kind of my training just finished, and I was actually waiting to be assigned to my command, and that's when 9/11 happened. That was my first day. I was to report to my command. The day 9/11 happened.
How would you describe the culture of the NYPD, having been there for as long as you were?
It's a diverse culture, I think the time that I was there, I thought people were very supportive of one another. Everybody kind of looked out for one another. I found that more working for the Housing Authority Police, because there was only 2,000 of us, opposed to 41,000 at the height of the manpower when I was in law enforcement with that agency.
Okay, so then we'll bring it up to September 11th. Tell me a little more about that day. You said it was going to be your first day on a new assignment?
Yeah, so, my wife's at work, and I'm staying in bed. It is September 11th now, and I remember it was a nice day, but when I woke up, the phone was ringing. I pick up the phone, and my wife goes, a plane or something hit the Trade Center, but I'm not sure what happened. I said, well, let me turn on the TV, because, she didn't have a TV at work. My wife worked at 1 Wall Street, so she's about 3 blocks from the Trade Center. So I turn on the TV, and I just think, oh, it's just a small aircraft hit the tower. It's a problem, but it's not what we found out it to be. So that's kind of what happened at that point.
And where were you living at that point?
So I lived at that time, we lived in Babbage, Brooklyn.
Okay, so You turn on the TV and like so many people, you're thinking small plane. Your mind doesn't immediately go to terrorism. How does the day unfold for you from there?
Okay, so I didn't think anything of it really, and I had a short conversation with my wife, and I end up hanging up the phone. Now I'm watching TV, and time moves on. The second aircraft hits, and I see it on TV. Now I have a conversation with my wife. My wife's a couple months pregnant this time with my son, and I go, Joanne, you got to get home. Get down the subway, right from your building, and just get home. I'll wait for you because I have to go somewhere. And I was going back and forth in my mind. I didn't have the phone number from my new command because I just got assigned to Manhattan South Narcotics Division. And I'm a first sergeant in the National Guard, so my rank's higher in the military than in the police department. So I called my unit in the National Guard and I asked, what's going on? We activated, and they said, nothing at this time. I said I'll call you back, and I said to myself, I got to make a decision. I have to do something. So I jumped in my car, and after waiting, no, let me go back. I'm waiting for my wife because I want to jump in my car. So I run out to the street, and I wanted to see for myself, and I could. I lived off 4th Avenue. I look and I see the towers burning. So I got the reality check. So I run back upstairs to the apartment. I'm waiting for my wife. So she finally shows up. It's maybe around 11 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I go, what took you so long? She goes, they stopped the train a couple of stops. I had to walk a few stops, which good 10 blocks she walked from where she was down to our subway stop. I think it was 72nd, 4th Avenue. So she had to walk from Sunset Park to Bay Ridge. So anyway, I gave her a kiss. I jumped in my car and went back to the 6-2 precinct. I had my uniforms in my locker. I didn't get a chance to clean my locker. I thought I had time that day to do it. Took all my uniforms, jumped back in my car, and I drove into Manhattan. So that was an experience unto itself because you had to take the Brooklyn Queens Expressway to get in, and it was closed off. The only people who were getting on the expressway were people like me. And it was a 6'8" police officer when I drove from my precinct. The 6'8" and the 6'2" border each other. I drove to a 6'8" police officer. I showed my ID, and he's like, "Go ahead." And I got on the BQE, and it's always crowded, and it was a ghost town. The only vehicles you saw were probably other off-duty police officers. You saw a couple of fire engines, EMS, a couple of patrol cars on the BQE. It was driving very fast. So I ended up taking the Brooklyn Bridge. And I'll never forget that. I'm on the Brooklyn Bridge, and the left-hand side is like all black, downtown Manhattan. And the right side, you could see the sun. And it was just very surreal to me as to what was going on. So I get to my command. I meet my lieutenant. He's like, obviously, get dressed. And I jumped into a van after a couple minutes under the direction of this gentleman, Lieutenant Mundell. And he's like, Tom, we're going to get you and a couple investigators. We're going to jump in the van, and we're going to set up somewhere downtown. I don't know where. So we're driving around downtown, and we get out, and ironically, I end up, I'll never forget this, I end up in front of my wife's building on 1 Wall Street. So I'm like, that's ironic to me. So anyway, we're standing there, we're like, what do we do? I mean, just everything's burning. And so what we were doing at that point was helping people, flee the area, if you will. Some time went on in the day because we were just really just walking around in groups of maybe 4 or 5 people patrolling. So I find myself about a block away from Building 7. It's maybe around 5 o'clock at night. I'm never going to forget this. So people talk a little bit about Building 7, but I was there when it came down because somebody yelled that one of the buildings was falling. And I'm not next to Building 7, maybe like a block or 2 from Building 7. I don't remember what street, but all of a sudden I look behind me, I see like smoke like I saw on TV and bricks flying. So I start running for safety away from that building with all these other police officers. And I'm running down the street, and I in front of me, I see a gun fall down to the ground. And it was I looked real quick, and I saw it was a court officer. I scooped the gun up, and because I had to keep running because the debris is coming towards us. and we end up going around a building, letting the debris pass us, and then I found the court officers. He go, "Here you go, brother," and he was so happy. And I put it in his chest, and he's smiling, and then like the debris just fell. So we let that kind of, I don't know, settle, and then we walked around and tried to regroup with the people that I was supervising and find each other. And then we were walking around, and it just really hit me then, all the debris and the shoes. Everybody, there was just shoes everywhere, you know, and the windows were blown out. Just so much destruction, you know. Being in combat, you know, being a combat veteran, I've seen, you know, destruction, and that was just as much as being in a combat zone. Just glass and debris and shoes, and something tells me in my head that all those shoes were shoes.
Did you and your wife have cell phones in 2001?
No, I did not. So everything that, you know, I was pretty much calling on landline if I had to call her.
Yeah. Now, you talked about roughly 4 to 5 man units who have just met up and are trying to figure out ways to be productive, to be helpful. Was there an organized, cohesive plan at that point? Were you taking orders from someone, or were you just looking to fill voids and help wherever you could?
Okay, so we had a captain. Our captain was there, and he was getting information from the inspectors and the chief. So there was definitely, you know, coordination as to where to go. But during a situation like that, you know, we just had to protect ourselves, and, you know, we had to regroup. So that was like the only time that I found myself when Building 7 came down, where there was some disorientation, if you will, and the command structure was just at that time period a little disoriented. But like I said, we got back on track.
Okay. You talked about initially just trying to get people out of the area, helping them evacuate the area. How would you characterize the mood of these civilians?
They were terrified. They were, you know, I was there by the time I had got there. Downtown in New York City, it was probably around 1 o'clock. So a lot of people have left the area at that time. And then I just took you up to where I was about 5 o'clock with Building 7. So much of that day, like I said, you know, we didn't get assigned to go down to the ground zero, to the pit, where the firefighters were generally, you know, working with, obviously with the Port Authority, police, and the NYPD. But we just kind of got assigned to areas around that perimeter. So we, you know, that was, in my opinion, like that day after the initial time there, we were just like, people had left the area. So we were just patrolling the area, and that was pretty much the day. I remember, for me, I had the National Guard in the back of my head, because I was figuring out when we were going to deploy, and I was unable to contact them. And what I found, about 10:30 at night, we were in downtown, and I saw National Guard units coming in. It wasn't my unit, but I saw Guard units starting to come into New York City. And then around about 11:30, we all went back to our command down at the pier in Manhattan South. Narcotic Division was down at the pier and off of the FDR. And then they got us back together and said, all right, we're going to meet back here at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to get your assignments. But for me, I knew I had to report to the National Guard, because I knew I was going to get orders. So I walked up to this Lieutenant Jimmy Johnson, who was the administrative lieutenant. I go, I got bad news. I'm not going to be here tomorrow. And he looked at me like I had 3 heads. I go, you know, I'm a first sergeant in the 1st of the 69th Infantry, and my unit's Delta Company out in Huntington, New York. I have to, you know, I'm going to meet, they're here already. I'm going to meet them. And he wasn't happy about it. He's like, all right, give me the orders when you can. So I said, okay. And then I went home, I slept for a couple hours, and I switched my uniforms. So I slept for a couple hours, put my camouflage uniform on, known as BDU's battle dress uniform. I had a green Jeep. I jumped in the Jeep, and I drove into New York and drove down to the Trade Center as close as I could get. And it's funny, they tried to, you know, the NYPD was busy, and it's funny, a police officer from New Jersey stops me in the middle of the road and says, you can't go down there. I'm like, I told him to move out of the way. I go, and they showed my sergeant, like, I understand what you're trying to do, but I got to get to the trade center. He was very nice. He's like, go ahead, I didn't know who you were. And then I just went down to the trade center and I met my unit. And I stayed down with the National Guard. I was down there for about a week. One of the things that I remember about that, I'd say it was about September 14th now. So we're down at the Trade Center for a couple days, providing security, and some of our soldiers were down at the pile doing bucket brigades with the fire department, the police. But my company, I was in Delta Company, we pretty much got assigned security. And one of the things that happened on September 14th was President Bush's famous bullhorn speech. So he came down with the Secret Service, and we set up a perimeter. We let his guys in and everything like that. And I thought that was pretty cool. It was nice to see, the people, whether they were Democrats, Republicans, didn't matter. They got to see the president because they need a president, regardless of who he was, had to say something to the country and the people down there. And he was the people were receptive, first responders and the people down at the World Trade Center from his speech. And, he did his speech, and then, I kind of wanted him to leave because everybody was kind of tense because our job was doing security, and, the Secret Service was there, and we were like worried about his safety because we were obviously at war. I would figure, after that second plane hit, I knew that. So again, once the president left, it was kind of like we were exhaling, like, okay, you did your speech, goodbye, nice speech. So, so I stayed there for about a week with the National Guard, and our battalion commander, Jeff Slack, he gave us a nice little speech thanking us for, doing what we needed to do to help New Yorkers out. So for me, that wasn't a day off. I went back to work the next day as an NYPD sergeant. So I donned my uniform and drove down to my command. They, again, threw us down in the van. And it was like a Monday, I think it was, because I had to go. Sunday was after the colonel spoke to us. So it's a Monday, and it's, I don't remember what time in the morning. It was late morning, and we show up, we're downtown Manhattan. So I go, all right, I know the drill. Inspector comes out, and he says, all right, I want to see all the supervisors. I'm saying, all right, we're going to get our assignments. And what are we going to do down here at this point? A week has passed. I'm going to do security. So the inspector goes, all right, we have a grim task. This is what I want you to do. And, if you guys need a break, give them a break. But we got to go down to Battery Park and look for body parts and evidence on rooftops. I said, you got to be fucking kidding me. I couldn't believe that, that hadn't been done yet. But it kind of makes sense because everybody was worried about what happened by the Trade Center. But due to the explosions and the wind and things like that, we had to account for, just like any other crime scene, because the World Trade Center was the largest crime scene, I would say, in America, if not the world. So we had to do our due diligence and search for body parts and every type of evidence. So we went to rooftops and did our thing, and that took us up to the afternoon, and then they said, all right, go to lunch. So we went to they had a ferry parked, which is off the water on the west side. I would say there's a mall down there. I can't think of the mall, but it's off Vesey Street down there. And they had ferries parked to feed the first response, firemen, police officers, any agencies that wanted to eat food down there. So, we spent some time down there, and then we went back and finished doing our search on my first day back. So I got assigned down there for 4 months, again, just doing security. But one of the things they want us to do one day during that time period, they interrupted our patrol down there and said, all right, go to the police academy. And this happened, I'd say, within the the third week after the Trade Center had fallen, maybe the second week. 2.5 to 3 weeks. Report to the police academy, bring all your investigators with you. So I had just got investigators, which are all detectives assigned to me, and undercover officers, and I brought my whole unit down there, and all the captains and all the brass, the inspectors and the chiefs were sitting on the podium. They said, you know, you're going to go out to subways and you're going to patrol subways in plain clothes and look to see if anybody does anything, doing anything on the tracks, anything suspicious, and try and identify people that if they do look suspicious. One of the controversial things I thought was, you know, Fourth Amendment rights were definitely a big question. Being a professor here at Monmouth, I bring that up at times, but I didn't really give that too much thought because I found the whole Trade Center thing, looking back, maybe we violated a couple of people's rights because we went to a reactive stance, into just, you know, we're worried about anybody could be a terrorist. We really went into overdrive. And I think the average American citizen was worried about that too. So that died down, obviously, but so I did that. So I patrolled subways with my investigators some days, and then I was down at the Trade Center on patrol again for about 4 months. One of the things that really bothered me, and if I think about it, about the Trade Center, is the smell. And the smell was, I call it the smell of death. It just, I hope I never smell that down there, but I used to hate to go down there after a while because it just would remind me of, like, you know, are we really making progress? In which we did make progress, but I felt like we were just in a standstill of time down there. You know, the sun for me never was out the days I was down there. It was always cloudy. Something always was burning. Something always was smelling. And that smell was absolutely horrible.
Let me ask you just a couple follow-up questions. I certainly don't want to be ghoulish, but I think this is historically important. When you were searching for remains in these relatively far-flung locations, did you recover any?
I personally did not. Maybe some of the detectives did. They weren't. Again, we worked for the chief of Organized Crime Control Bureau. So they would have to turn their remains over to the Detective Bureau.
Oh my goodness. This is difficult for you, and I know first responders are a tough bunch and you see a lot daily, but were there any counseling or support services provided for all of you at Ground Zero?
Not at that time that I remember. One of the things that I failed to mention during my first week with the National Guard, now that we're catching up, our armory was taken over by the governor's office, and the NYPD pretty much took over the drill floor for grief counsel, for survivors. And what they did, and that's at 68 Lexington Avenue, New York, our armory became the epicenter for, you know, a loved one to go to and say, is my family member alive? Are they dead? And there were pictures all over the armory on the outside of, you know, if you find this person. And I was so busy, I captured that because I did get some time, like, just to eat dinner or and just maybe just walk outside, you know, when I did have some time, because we worked like 14 hours down there when I was with the National Guard. You know, that was kind of tough. And, you know, that was our armory, our headquarters. And, you know, as a result, there was no room. Like, we had to sleep on floors. That's where I slept at night. We were able to get some cots, but most of us slept on the floor on the second floor of the armory because the armory was being used for, you know, by the police department, and the battalion commander was his office was taken over by Governor Pataki at the time.
And while we're talking about these first few weeks at Ground Zero, and you know, you're switching uniforms, how did you feel that interagency cooperation was there?
I thought it was fantastic. I don't think there were really any major arguments as to who was doing what. I think it was people agreed to things and we just got things done. You know, we had a couple instances when I was with the National Guard, we needed things from the NYPD, and they were great. And it really had nothing to do with whether I was there because I worked for both agencies, just things got done. There's no problem with interagency cooperation. I thought that was a really good thing,
Good. So talk to me about the period between this initial 4 weeks and the flurry of activity and when you wind up serving in Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Okay, so again, I'm down there for 4 months, and that was my assignment. So I'm down at the trade center, either doing security or I'm with my narcotics team patrolling subways. So there was a big gap of time from the trade center from me going to deploying to Iraq. I literally went back to narcotics down the road after 4 months, and I started to learn to be a narcotics sergeant, doing buy and bust. And I did a federal operation with the DEA, so I did my job. So time had moved on to 2014, where I had that question that some police officer came up to me, or it wasn't a question, just I had a memory that this police officer right after the trade center was like, "We got to get these bastards." And that's when the light bulb went on for me, that we're at war, you're in the National Guard, you're going to war. So that day came for me that time period came for me in November of 2004, November 2004.
There was no question of you mobilizing for Operation Enduring Freedom?
No.
Okay, so November 2004. How do you initially learn that this is going to
Yeah,
happen?
so I kind of knew it was going to happen because when I was in my National Guard unit, they were starting to deploy units, and they told me, "Hey, you're going to go with another unit." And I was fine with that, because it goes by, you have to go with your rank. You have to be boarded into that command structure, if you will. So I found myself in November 2004 going with the 53rd Army Liaison Team. We went to Fort Benning, Georgia in November, and I trained there up until January. I was lucky to go home for Christmas for a couple of days, and because I knew when I got back, I'd be on a plane. And sure enough, I got back on New Year's Day after New Year's, and we flew to Kuwait on January 4th. And we were in Kuwait. So I stayed in Kuwait for like maybe 4 days for training, and then we got up on a plane and we flew to Baghdad, Iraq. So my unit was assigned to the 18th Airborne Corps in Baghdad, Iraq. Our base of operations was the U.S. Embassy. I lived behind the U.S. Embassy. And then my assignment, I got assigned to they broke up our unit to different jobs. So my assignment was to work at the Ministry of Defense, which is our equivalent of the Pentagon. My job was to be the non-commissioned officer in charge of Operation Intelligence for that cell, if you will, of my unit. And I got assigned to work with the Iraqi Army, kind of as an advisor and trainer. Basically, our job there was to rebuild the Iraqi Army and get them to be self-sufficient, to do the job on their own. So that was pretty much what I did for my entire time when I was in Iraq. I worked for the Ministry of Defense. Our first week in Iraq wasn't easy. This really scared a lot of family members. I was at work at the Ministry of Defense, and I get a phone call that the embassy was getting rocketed. Thank God they didn't put any charge. That was common, a charge in the artillery shell. That was kind of common, thank God, because there was when you would get hit with a round, if you will, but it really wouldn't explode because there was no there was nothing there too. It was just a shell. So they would propel a rocket, but it didn't have any munitions in it. But unfortunately, about 4 or 5 people died at the trade center. At the embassy. My concern, I had soldiers over there, and I found out that they were all okay, and that caused a frenzy with the loved ones because they were trying to find out if everybody was okay. We did have, we had phones we could call to our families and, email, and we were able to get that information out because a lot of people did find out on TV that had happened. And then again, thank God no one from our unit got injured or killed.
Had you deployed overseas before?
No, that was my first deployment overseas to a combat zone. It was my first, I was at that time, I had about 20 years in the National Guard. I was almost getting ready to retire, and then I got activated.
You just mentioned your years of service. Is it 23 years with NYPD and 27 years combined with the Army National Guard?
Yes, I did about 23 and a half with the NYPD. I did 27 years with the National Guard.
Okay.
But like I said, when I was in Iraq, I had about 21 years in the National Guard.
Did you feel, well, let me rephrase the question. What was the reception of you in the U.S. Army by the Iraqi Army and the Iraqi people?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a mixed bag, and I'll tell you why. Let's talk about the Iraqi Army, and then we'll talk about the civilian population. The Iraqi Army, the officers were split, and that's how we were dealing with it. And what we should have did is we should have took more officers and on. A lot of officers that the U.S. Army, after the invasion of 2003, they took a lot of the officers that really worked for Saddam and kind of pushed them to the side. They didn't want to deal with them and tried to rebuild the army with maybe some officers that the soldiers looked at as in not being as strong or respected. That kind of worked against us by getting rid of those former generals and former officers, because we found that some of them joined insurgent groups or joined other factions that went against us in the end. So that didn't work well. The people were very receptive of the military there in 2003. Remember, I got there, it was 2005 at this point. Things were starting to change. That's when you had the Sunnis and the Shia, the two different sects, really battling each other at this point, because under Saddam, you had the Sunnis were in power and the Shia people were like the lower class. And that was funny that, the Americans and everybody around would not put the Shia down. We were like, they're equal to you, and the Sunni people did not like that. But the people were receptive to us for a while. But one of the things that bothered me, talking to my interpreters at the end of the war or during the war, they said that under Saddam Hussein's regime, they felt that, the people, even though they were kind of controlled under Saddam, they gave them semblance. There was order to the society. When we came in, after a short period of time, there was what they called Alibaba, where there's just chaos happened. People were just taking whatever property they could. People would take, like, if a garbage truck was sitting out in the street and the keys were in it, they would take it just to say that they had something. A lot of chaos happened over there. So my interpreters felt that, again, there was order under Saddam and chaos under, when we got there. So democracy isn't necessarily for everybody. So, they didn't necessarily, it's funny, my interpreters generally embrace the U.S. culture, but like they said, it might not work for them because, the people over there, they felt when they told me, maybe we kind of need that. We need someone to tell us what to do. I mean, that's what have been living their whole lives, under the dictatorship under Saddam Hussein. And that was pretty interesting over there. I'm thinking about, he was on trial. So I was there during his trial from 2005. I had left in January 2006, and his trial had ended, and he was obviously, executed by his own people. I wasn't there for that, but I thought that was pretty interesting that I was there during the time of his trial. Looking back, I'm thinking about my interpreters and just thinking about even Afghanistan, even though I wasn't a part of that, I ask myself a lot of times, was it really worth it? On the Iraq side of the house, There were no weapons of mass destruction. They weren't found. You know, I think we put a lot of time, effort, a lot of lives are lost, a lot of resources put there. And I don't think we got too much of a bang for our buck, if you will, when it came to Iraq. I think I could have not been there. I'm not saying I wasn't proud to serve, but I don't think we need to be there. I don't think I need to be there. As far as Afghanistan, we saw what happened. It's 2022 now. I'm not an Afghanistan vet. I'd probably be really upset if I was an Afghanistan vet. But, you know, I understood why we went there initially, to get Osama bin Laden. Right? We found he was hiding in Pakistan. I understand that we need some sort of presence in that type of the world, but we didn't need to get involved in that war. And we really should have, again, same thing with Iraq, should have put the time and resources. We lost a lot of lives, again, at the cost of what? What do we get from it? So, you know, the only good thing as far as Iraq, I think we have a base there, you know, still to this day on the border of Iran. I mean, we have a good relationship with Iraq. We're present there, but I don't think we need to establish and do all that to get presence in Iraq. So, you know, what I learned from the Trade Center is I understood we had to defend ourselves, but again, the way we handled going into Iran and Iraq, Iraq and Afghanistan, I don't think we should have really looked at our history. You know, the Russians lost against Afghanistan, and that didn't tell us anything going up front. I can't believe, you know, we kind of made that costly mistake and got nothing from it.
I very much appreciate hearing your thoughts on that. At the time that you were in Iraq, how was the morale of your men?
My unit, the morale was fine. But in the U.S. Army, two bad things were happening. And I don't mean the Army, I mean the whole branch, all the branches of service, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines that are there. Highest divorce rates in 2005. I read a military magazine called Stars and Stripes. It's in Stars and Stripes. That's documented. Highest divorce rates. And the highest deaths were in 2005, from what I remember. Again, I had left, but looking from 2005 to 2003. So when I was there, the death toll of U.S. soldiers was very high. So, you know, morale was good overall, but like I said, when it came to those two things, I mean, especially getting divorced, most of the active duty guys, again, I'm being a National Guard or reservist, maybe things were a little different, but active duty, they were taking a really high rate of divorce because of being deployed. You know, I went one deployment, some of those soldiers were on their second, third deployments. When I left, by 2006, when I left, so people were on their second, coming up on their third deployments. And that's rough on any soldier.
So you left in 2006. Was there any question of you staying longer? Did they try to get you to stay longer?
So there's rules that they have. They're pretty good that for a guardsman, reservist, even the active duty, they were pretty fair. That if you did stay, it would only be for 30 days more. But we left and we got back right on time. But you know, there was always that talk. Yeah, we might stay a little longer, but for us, it was you might stay another 30 days. That never came to tuition.
Okay. And when did you get out of the Guard, or are you out of the Guard?
No, I'm out. So I came back, and I guess the Army liked my leadership style because they gave me a 1 block on my non-commissioned officer evaluation report. So when I got back to my unit, actually before I got back from Iraq, I found I was going to get promoted. So when I got back to the United States, and what we call demob, you know, turning your equipment and everything, I only spent a couple drills with the 53rd Army Liaison Team, and I got promoted to the rank of sergeant major. I did the role of an operations sergeant major with the 1st and 69th Infantry, the unit I had just left before I deployed, and that was kind of bittersweet. I was coming home, and I got promotion. That's the highest enlisted rank you can get in the Army, being a sergeant major, and I was very happy. My wife was very happy, and she's probably like, when you're getting out? And I go, let me just enjoy this for a little while. So I ended up staying for a couple more years. I think it was like 3 years. And I retired from the National Guard in May of 2009. So I had about 27 years of service.
And what about your career with the police? When you come back from Iraq?
Okay, so you want to go back to
Just briefly.
2000, okay, it's 2006. So I come home and I have 2 weeks of time, leave time to burn. So I'm home with my family for 2 weeks. And I go back, I decide I want to go back to the police department because I want to wrap that chapter of my career up.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my wife, you know, what should I do? She's like, well, go back and see what happens. So I go back, and I'll never forget, you go to headquarters and you meet the police commissioner and all these dignitaries. Anyway, so they come up and they go, okay, you know, you have over 20 years. And my goal was to retire in 20 years. They go, well, how long is it? Because I lost track. And they go, you were starting your 22nd year. So I was in Iraq from my 20 to 21st, and I came back. So I didn't know what to do, and they said, well, you're going to go back to your... So I had to go to training for a couple of weeks. And after training, I went back to my old command. I had a really good job at that time because I left that out. I had left narcotics, and I got a job with the Chiefs Training Unit, which is a really nice job. And I spoke to my Lieutenant Kevin Brown. He's like, of course you can come back. And I went back there and I said, you know what, I'm comfortable, and it's just a good way to segue coming back to the United States. And I did that. So I stayed there from 2006, and I retired from the NYPD in 2008. And again, the National Guard, I left them in 2009. So it was a period of time I had just worked for the National Guard after I retired from the police department.
Okay.
And then I found myself working towards my doctorate after I retired, and that kind of led me to how I got here.
Okay. What were some of the highlights of your years with the police department?
I had a good career. I really have to say, as a police officer, I had a really decent amount of details. I was very lucky. Again, as I told you, I was in the police academy, and I had some special assignments within the police academy that I've done. And then I told you I worked for the legal bureau. And then when I got promoted to sergeant, I would say that one of the best assignments was working for the training and for the chief's office, because there was a lot of education and training that I couldn't get. One of the things I do regret, when I got back from the police department from Iraq, they asked me, what do you want? What type of training you want? I go, I just want to be home with my family. No, do you want to go to the FBI Academy? They wanted me to go to the FBI Academy. I actually turned it down. I turned the chief's offer down. I'm sure he wasn't happy about it, but he understood, because I said I wanted to be with my family. And my son, I missed, you know, he went from 2, and by the time I got home, I did have a leave briefly in between, but, you know, he was almost 4 years old. So, you know, it was just time for me to spend time with my family, and I really appreciated that time. And that was nice, when I did go back to the police department, I had some weekends off, and I, you know, had some decent vacation time for the time that I stayed. And then ultimately when I retired, I didn't go to work right away, and I was kind of Mr. Mom for a while. And then I went for my doctorate, and then I ended up here.
Okay. And what about some highlights of your time with the Guard?
Wow, it was all great. I started out as a private, and working as a private's tough. So I was a reconnaissance scout. And it's funny, I always laugh. I say I'm a true dirt scholar, being in the mud, because I was in the infantry, and then teaching here at Monmouth is pretty a big deal, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like, you know, I could brush myself off and reflect on a lot of things I've done in life. I feel like I give a lot back. I think I feel like I was able to really walk the walk and Now I can talk the talk.
Okay. If you're comfortable sharing, have you dealt with any health issues as a result of your time at Ground Zero or in Iraq, or have many of the men that you worked with?
I would say health issues, no, thank God. I'm really was worried about that, you know, because being at Ground Zero for 4 months, being in Iraq, they burn everything. And that is a concern of mine. I did do the 9/11 screening before I retired. I try and keep my lungs clean. I worry about COVID for that reason. I did get the shot. Didn't want it, but I got it. But I would say one of the things I think, and I had this conversation with my son, I think we need to do a better job is when people witness a horrific event like 9/11 or a combat veteran, that you have some sort of, you talk about it. And one of the things I thought, which the police department did a nice job when I came back for training, they took us to the VA and we got to share some of our experiences. And I learned someone always got it tougher than you, and I saw one guy who happened to be obviously an NYPD guy, saw a lot of action and kind of broke down. And you know what, I'm glad we did that session for him because he needed to vent. And I think we, as Americans, really need to do that for our soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen when they come back. I think we need to spend more time on it. I not just sit down with a psychologist and say, hey, you okay? Of course you're going to say you're okay, because, I find soldiers want to go see their family and stuff, but I think you have to go back and reach and grab them. I would say that for some, even in law enforcement, for police officers seen something like 9/11 and been involved in a shooting, you gotta, check on them and have that conversation and kind of revisit. It might be painful to revisit it of an event that happened, but you have to do that because I think that's the only way you're going to heal. And maybe you need to talk about with your peers. People have been there, because you'll feel at ease to do that. That's my taking of that.
Do you think we're safer today than we were pre 9/11?
No, I'd say it's equal. And we have technology to try and prevent terrorist attacks and things like that. But I teach in my classes, you actually have to think like a terrorist. You have to, you got to use imagination, because they're using their imagination. So you probably want me to say yes. I'm not gonna lie. I think
most people have not said yes.
Okay. I think we need to remain vigilant, and I think we should always feel that there's a threat out there. And I'm from New York. That's the target. If you could take New York, you can have the world.
Did 9/11 change you in any ways?
I think so. 9/11 changed pretty much, I looking back, my whole life. One thing I didn't tell you, this is, I think, important. So I got married in New York in 2000, April of 2000. And my wedding reception was in the World Trade Center. And it was a cloudy day, and I looked outside, my new wife's there, she's like, what are you looking at? I go, I want to look at New York. I can't, I'm looking at a cloud. She's like, we can come back here. I said, I'd like to come back here. So I never got a chance to go back there. So so that memory, yeah, it would have been nice to do that. So that changed that. And then, yeah, it did change me because I never would have been in combat. I think a lot of things wouldn't happen in my life because of that. And funny, my son says, you're like a walking history book. And I laughed. And I said, well, you are too, because your history is starting now. I'm just passing some information off to you.
So you're comfortable talking about your experiences with your family?
Yeah, because I think they were part of it. Like my wife has her own story. Like I shared that whole thing about telling her to go to the subway, and she has a story about trying to get out of the building. They wouldn't let her out of the building.
Mm-hmm.
So she has her own story, but she was able to get to the subway because they didn't know what to do with her.
Mm-hmm.
They were worried that she was going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally they realized, their security said she works for a bank. She says, let me, we'll let you go. And, they delayed her from getting on the subway. So again, I think everybody has their own story that's down there. I don't think you necessarily have to be a police officer or a fireman, first responder. Everybody's got their own story down there.
Did she return to working in the city?
Yeah. One of the things which bothered me also, I lived in Brooklyn on 4th Avenue on 72nd Street. I'm sorry, it was in the 70s. And I looked out, and we had a funeral parlor across. I lived up on the 6th floor, and we had a funeral parlor, and it was horrible because all the firemen's funerals were held, and you see a fire truck in front of the funeral home every day after the Trade Center for months and months.
You never got to return to the World Trade Center to take in the view with your bride, but have you visited the Freedom Tower?
No, but I have gone to the reflecting pools and things like that. So that's on my list to go there, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered?
Not really. Like I said, I think just being in the world we live in, I think Americans just need to remain vigilant as to what's going on, and don't think that, it's all roses every day. We just look over your shoulder once in a while.
All right, well, Dr. Carey, thank you for making the time. I don't have to tell you, less than 1% of the population serves in the military, right? So capturing every single one of these stories is important, and I thank you so much.
Thank you.